So back to the beginning, the Zentangle is the project that we're going to be doing. It's hopefully something. It's a calming exercise. It should be relaxing. It shouldn't be too stressful. It should be something that like you get in the zone to listen to your music and kind of focus on just drawing different patterns. So you guys are going to create a well-balanced composition using different patterns. That's the objective. You're going to take a piece of paper. We talked about composition briefly. We're going to talk about it a little bit more, what makes a good composition. All of those principles of design that you guys went through and you photographed, those are the things that make a composition good. So if it's balanced, and if it's got a variety of patterns, and if it's got, it's going to be unified, it's black and white, and all those different principles that we talked about with how you put your artwork together. So vocabulary, balance. Does anyone want to read it for me? All right. Balance is arranging elements so that no other part of a work overpowers or seems heavier than any other part. So when we went through the principles of design, we talked about with balance, that was the photograph of the hay bales, where there was a smaller hay bales on one side and a larger one on the other. So you want to make sure that your composition is balanced as you're going through it. Composition is the arrangement of the elements and principles in a work of art. So it's how you put all those ingredients together. Line is a continuous mark made on a surface by a moving point. So you guys used a lot of line with your pattern exercise. Pattern is the repetition of an element or elements in a work of art. So we talked about pattern. You guys took a photograph of pattern in fabric, most of you. A string. So Zentangle has its own language. A string is an organic line that divides up the space in your drawing. So a string is what you're going to use to divide up your piece of paper. And a tangle is another word for different patterns that are available. Each one has a specific name in the Zentangle world. But a tangle is another word for patterns, like a made-up word for Zentangle. So Zen is the art, or not the art, but it's being in a state of like rest and well-being and calm. And then tangle is using patterns on there. And then value is the lightness or the darkness of a color. Remember with the value, you turned your camera into black and white and you took a picture. And so value is black and white. And we talked about, with your patterns, we talked about kind of like how you can get value just using black and white and coloring some things in and not coloring other things in. So a Zentangle is an abstract drawing created by using different patterns. A string, like I said, is generally a random line that divides up your space. So this is an example of just the outline of a Zentangle with these strings, these lines inside, how it breaks up this giant square. So what it does is divides up little tiny spaces within it. So it's pretty equally balanced. You don't see any clusters of tiny little spots with big open spots. It's pretty evenly spread out. So it doesn't look too congested on any side. It doesn't look empty on each side. So this is the first step in making your Zentangle, is that you are going to use line to break up your space equally and balanced. So you guys are going to begin by drawing a roughly 1-inch border around your page. You do not have to use a ruler to make sure that it's an inch unless you want to. Make sure that you draw lightly because dark lines are nearly impossible to erase. And the border should be no bigger than an inch. I'm going to demonstrate all of this, so I'll show you what that means. You're going to create your strings by drawing lines that break up your space. Lines can be organic, meaning like wavy and curvy, or geometric, like you use a ruler and you evenly, use your ruler in straight lines to break up your space. You don't want to draw too many because each intersection you make is a space you're going to fill in with a pattern. So if you've got these tiny little spaces, then you're going to have to use little tiny little patterns to fill them in. But then again, you don't want to have these big giant spaces because that will, your paper will be, or your project won't be very interesting. Once you do that, you're going to begin filling in each space with a pattern from your pattern exercise or not. So you have 12 patterns that you could use right now. Even a few of you handed yours in already. You have a photograph of your pattern exercise, so you can use that to look at as a reference if you want. You don't have to use any. It says that you have to use at least 5 of your original patterns, but that just makes your life easier if you want to use those patterns because you already came up with them and you already have them as an idea. But you can use as many different patterns as you want. Once you have everything drawn in pencil, you're going to go over your lines in Sharpie. Again, you can use the thick or the thin Sharpies depending on how thin you want your lines. Once you're done, same thing, you're going to erase the entire drawing over top to get rid of the pencil lines that are underneath of it. So here's an example kind of a Zentangle. See all these different patterns and, that fill things in, how they're equally balanced. This is my example, which I'll show you in a little bit, that I made. So the one thing you guys really want to keep in mind is how we talked about like patterns like this or like this, where it's just line, and like how it looks lighter, like here where there's more white paper and less black colored in, looks lighter than like over here where these are darker seeming shapes because there's more stuff colored in. So you want to make sure you balance those things out. So once you start drawing your patterns, I would hold your paper back and really look at it and make sure that your patterns are balanced across your page. So it's not too much light compared to like too much. If there's too much like black over here, it's going to seem unbalanced if there's too much light over here. So you want to evenly spread it out. That looks awful, but here's another example of some patterns in a Zentangle. Lots of different patterns. You can make your lines thicker or thinner. So if you want thick lines, you can do that. And if you want thin lines, you can do that as well. So you can balance out the thick versus thin lines. Here's another one of different, like all these different really cool patterns that you guys have that you can work from. And again, if you're stuck, Google Zentangle, Google patterns, Google black and white patterns, and see if you can get some ideas of what you can use. And then here's another one, all different patterns. And you can get as complicated as you want to. Like this should be an enjoyable activity where you sit down and you just work and don't have to think too much. So here's the rubric. This is the rubric for every art project that we're going to do in class. The first part is, did you meet the requirements? That's obviously important. Your idea, the media or medium, how well did you use your materials? The elements of art, how well did you use those? The principles of design, how well did you use that? Craftsmanship is always very, very important. So is it neat? Did you erase all your pencil lines? Is everything colored in? Did you use a ruler? Did you trace like lines and curves? If you're looking for circles, I would look around your house for something to trace, like the cap off of a bottle or different size jars or containers you can trace circles from. And then your realization, how does your outcome compare? Like, what did you envision, and then what happened? Like, how did you realize it? How did it come into fruition? And then your effort and your work habits. So how much effort did you put in the piece? Obviously, if you guys were sitting here in front of me, I would see how much work and effort you put in the piece because I could see you work. And starting next week, I'll see most of you. But virtual, if you're virtual, then I'm going to need to see like how you're progressing, and I'm going to have to do more check-ins with you guys so I can see how your work is coming along.